Welcome back to Inspiring Voices. Listen, I'm super excited about this next installment, and I really do hope that you have been inspired and that it has encouraged some level of transformation in your life thus far. Today will be no different, I'm sure. We have the culture doctor with us today, Miss Leah M. Forney. How are you doing today?
I am good. How are you?
I am well. I'm super excited for you to share your journey and inspire our audience with the power of your story. I really do appreciate you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Seriously, I look forward to it. So let's get into it.
Let's jump right in. So let's talk about background and early influences. Tell us a little bit about who you are, but also can you share any experiences that shaped the voice that you bring to the world?
Yeah, so I love to tell people I am a Jesus girly. I love the Lord. I might cuss a little or a lot, depending on the situation, but I'm also a New Yorker. So I'm Brooklyn born, Queens raised. So shout out to the New Yorkers out there. And my earlier days was rooted in a lot of chaos and calamity and dysfunction. So I was born to two parents who were addicts and in and out of prison. I was actually born addicted to drugs. And so very early dysfunction and trauma was in my life. And so I was adopted by my maternal grandmother, me, my older brother, and the sister that came right underneath me. And just having to learn how to navigate life without your parents, having to navigate life feeling abandoned and rejected. And it was hard. It was very hard. Abandonment and rejection unfortunately plants seeds and makes children, especially our young people, feel like they're not good enough, they're not valued, they're not loved, right? And so, as a young girl trying to figure out who I was, I did a lot of things that so many of us do. I turned to sex at a young age. I gravitated to older men at a young age. I used my body, just trying to find love in all the wrong places. But something else that I did it was kind of like my own little secret was I was writing. My grandmother used to always tell me that every time she saw me as a kid, she always saw me with a book and a pen. She never knew what I was writing, but she always saw me with a book and a pen. And so writing actually became a way of escape for me. And as a little girl, when I was watching all of my friends, in two-parent households and got mom and dad going to, the school and all these things, and I got grandma and grandpa or grandma and auntie, writing became my way of just escaping my reality. And so I would actually pen stories, fictional stories about my parents. And so when my friends would ask me questions about like my dad, I always had this elaborate story that he was a CIA agent on a top secret mission because it was easier to tell that story than to tell that my father was an alcoholic and in and out of prison and I didn't really have a relationship with him. So my early childhood shaped a lot of who I am today. And because of that, I ended up in situations with domestic violence and sexual violence, again, trying to find love in all the wrong places. But I used those things and I used that pain to now be who I am today as the culture doctor. But my childhood shaped a lot of that.
That's so good. I applaud you for your courage and even sharing that with us today. One thing that I am hearing this constant pattern and rhythm in these conversations is how pain fueled this purpose. Most of
Yeah.
us who are doing what people see and they see us doing it seamlessly don't know the story behind everything that you see now. And so I love how even you used imagination to
Yeah.
survive, to get through that. Wow. What values during those times did you gain that still guide you in some way? The more positive values, maybe.
Yeah, I think the biggest one was learning how resilient I was, right?
Yeah.
Because so many young people don't realize how resilient they are. I was having a conversation recently with someone about high achieving individuals, and I realized that there's this correlation between young people who are resilient and high achieving, right? And that
Mhm.
correlation is that we just learn how to tune things out. Right? When it gets too heavy, we learn how to tune things out, how to block things out, and how
Yeah.
we get this tunnel vision and stay focused. My environment, my upbringing was the reason why I knew that I didn't want to end up like my parents. So I locked in on that. I locked in on the fact that I was looking at what drug addiction and alcoholism and incarceration and coming from a broken home and abandonment and rejection and all of that, what it was doing to me and my siblings, because we were all responding to it differently. I was looking at how, my older brother and my sisters, they were all going down different paths. And for me, I was like, I don't want to be like my parents. I didn't know what that
Mm,
looked like, but I was like, I don't want to be like my parents. So I locked in on education. I went to school.
yeah.
I got the college degree. I got the master's degree. I made it my business to become this high achieving individual where I knew that no matter what life threw at me, I
Yeah.
could bounce back. And so one of my favorite mantras and something I tell myself every day is that I have survived 100% of the worst things that
Mm,
could ever happen to me. And so now I can thrive through 100% of the best things that could ever happen to me. And so the
yeah.
biggest value was learning resilience and realizing that everybody don't have what I call the resilience factor. Like some people can't bounce back. Some people do succumb to things like addiction and incarceration because my parents did. But I learned at a very young age through creativity and imagination that I was really building a muscle of resilience and that no matter what I experienced in life, I was going to be okay because I could bounce back.
Yeah. But did you ever have that, even though you saw, where your parents had been and you saw your brother, your siblings as well, was there ever, like, what was that aha moment? Was there ever like this pivotal incident or experience that you are
Mhm.
comfortable sharing that was like, yeah, I know that this right here is, I got to do something different? What was that pivotal moment that transformed your journey?
Yeah, so I think the biggest pivotal moment for me, well, two I think of is one ending up in a domestic violence situation very early on. Being 19, 20 years old, thinking I found the guy that I was supposed to be with, him being the charming person and then turning out to be this monster, and realizing that I actually was following in the steps of my aunt and my mother because my mother experienced domestic violence and so did my aunt. And I witnessed my aunt's abuse when I was 9 years old, right? So not realizing again those things that I was seeing kind of put me on this path, right? In my mind, I'm saying, nope, it ain't gonna never be me. I'm not gonna, but then end up
Mhm.
in the same situation. And I think going through that situation at that time and still trying to figure out who I am as a woman of God, right? I remember what my grandmother had taught me, and she always taught me that when you get yourself in a bind, call on Jesus. That's what she taught me. And so
Mhm.
I remember being 19, 20, 21 at the time in this relationship, and this man hits me for the last time. And I remember locking myself in the bedroom and calling on Jesus. And I never at that time, like I wasn't walking with him like I walk with him now. I did what most of us do when we get of a certain age. We gonna go figure this thing called life out on our own terms, right? And realizing that like the Bible tells us that when you train up a child in the way that they go, when they get older, they won't depart. And I'm a living witness of that because my
Yes.
grandmother taught me those things. She taught me how
Yeah.
to pray. She taught me how to read.
Mhm.
She took me to church even when I was kicking and screaming and being like, why do I gotta go to this thing? Right? Like she really planted those seeds. And so it was Jesus that I could truly say that when I got myself in a bind, and I could call on him. And I remember specifically saying, I don't even know if you hear me because we don't talk. But if you get me
Mm,
out of this, I promise you I'll serve you with my life. Literally, the very next morning, the guy that was abusive woke up from a night of being under the influence of drugs and literally said, get out. I knew in that moment, God heard me.
yeah.
I grabbed my stuff. I called my aunt, was like, come here with me. And I
Yeah.
left. And so when I think about those moments, it's that moment, and particularly at 21, 22 years old, getting out of an abusive situation, and then
Mhm.
thinking about being sexually assaulted and navigating that experience,
Mhm.
after starting over, moving to North Carolina, starting over, and ending up in a situation that was so traumatic and having to again navigate it. And the only thing I could think about was, what did my grandmother teach me? That when you
Mm.
get into something, call on Jesus.
Jesus. Listen, look, I'm over here. I done start church rocking and everything because this is why I love stories and hearing people's stories. Because so many of our stories, if we just came out of ourselves and our comfort zone to share it, so many
Yeah.
of our stories are intertwined. And I had that same thing happen to me. And like you said, though that upbringing, what I was taught, came back to me, and that was
Yeah.
exactly. I said, God, if you get me out of here, I will not come back to this. And I almost literally died that day. And it was that moment of like not knowing what to do, but knowing that that's all I got. That's all I got. But knowing that
Oh yeah.
now that's more than enough. Having God and
Mm-hmm.
having is more than enough. At the time I was like, that's all I got is call on Jesus. I love that. And I'm so listen, I'm gonna move on because I I don't stop. Listen, we won't get through this. We won't get through this. But I love that, and I love that you shared that, and that's also an encouragement to mothers. I always say, I know that we're not talking about that in particular, but I know that for me, I've had those moments. My daughter's 18 now, but throughout time in her life, I'm like, oh, did I do everything
Yeah.
right? And I remember God telling me one time, trust the training, trust the seed
Mm.
planted, and that literally transformed my heart and mind to not worry, but just trust. You put it in her, and it's gonna come up. It's gonna spring up.
Oh
Just don't
yeah.
worry. So I love
Yeah.
that's confirmation.
No, and it's really good confirmation because I think a lot, like
Mhm.
you said, and I'm not a parent, I'm an aunt of 13, and they
Mhm.
drive me crazy. But I always tell my siblings, like, trust that what you
Yeah.
give your children when they need it, they're gonna remember what mommy and daddy taught them,
Mhm.
because I can always think back on all the teachings. I might not have wanted to hear them, you know, at 10, 12, 14, 16. I might not have wanted to hear them,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I can always thank God at almost 40 that there is still wisdom nuggets and lessons from those years that when I'm needing something, I could go back to what did grandma teach me.
Yes, I love that. So I love the lessons that you learn and the lessons that I'm learning even through hearing your story. How can others, let's kind of shift to again that inspiration. How can others apply the certain lessons about resilience and taking the things that you were given early on? How can we apply those to our own lives?
Yeah, I think what I've learned about resilience is that it's in you. Like we were all born with that resilience. I think what happens is trauma has a way of distorting who we really are at our core, right? Before we were ever, experiencing any form of trauma, we were resilient people. We were creative people. We were, people that, you know, knew how to make way and get ourselves out of stuff. And so I think that we lose it because of trauma. And so what I've learned through therapy and through God is how to find that again, right? And it really starts with just acknowledging where you are, acknowledging what you've experienced, but also acknowledging the core of who you are because you were created without trauma. At the core of who you are a creative being,
Mhm.
right? You are resilient, you are courageous. So it starts with tapping into that and realizing that I already have that in me. Everything that I need in this
Mhm.
lifetime,
Yeah.
God has already given it to me. It's
Yeah.
already in me. And so I look at it as, you know how you got a favorite shirt or a favorite outfit and you throw it in the closet and then you throw a whole bunch of other stuff in the closet and now you're trying to find it and you like, I know I got this daggone, and so you combing through to find the thing. That's what we have to do with our trauma, right? Our trauma is on top of who we really are. And so we got to take the time to comb through it and pull back the layers and heal and do the work so that we can get to who we are at the core of us, which is a resilient, courageous, creative being.
I love that, and that's also a great segue to this next point. I think that's a great starting point when you say to us sharing our own stories to inspire, influence, and make positive impact. I think some people don't know where to start and they feel stuck, but I think what you said about this awareness of who you are and kind of the things that when you comb through your life, and look at your story, I think people don't understand they have so much more to
Yeah.
offer, right?
Yeah, we do. And I think The thing that keeps us, in my opinion, from holding or telling the stories,
Mhm.
one,
Mhm.
well, two things. One, some of us like to stay victim, right? It's kind of easy
Uh-oh.
to stay the victim, right?
True.
But then
True.
also, two, many of us haven't made peace with our own story. We've made peace with the part of the story that either keeps us as a victim or we make peace of parts of the story that we're comfortable sharing. And so
Mhm.
I've had to learn, even myself, right, that God has challenged me to be like, no, you can't tell parts of the story. If you're going to tell it, tell all of it, right? Because even with my sexual violence story, most people know the adult sexual violence. They don't know the child and adolescent sexual abuse, right? And so God had to challenge me in that. Like, if you're going to tell it, tell all of
Mm.
it. Don't
Mm.
don't tell pieces of it. And I think that's why we struggle with really sharing our story. The other thing is that we don't think that our story matters, and it
Mm.
does because
Yeah.
somebody else can hear your story and recognize themselves in it and get something that they need. I am a firm believer that when God allows you to experience anything and you overcome it, you really have an obligation to go help somebody else.
Absolutely.
And the way you do that is by telling your story.
Mhm.
It's why we have
Absolutely.
testimony in church, right? It's why
Yeah.
we testify, right?
Yeah.
About where we've been because you never know who on your journey
Right.
needs what you have to offer, and I've
Mhm.
learned that lesson. I give a perfect example of that. I went through grief 8
Mhm.
years ago, lost the love of my life unexpectedly. In that time of me going through grief, God instructed me to write a book. I'm like, I'm
Mm.
not writing no book. I'm trying to
Mhm.
get through this grief. I
Mhm.
write the book out of obedience, not
Mm.
knowing that 3 to 4 years later, I would have a mentee whose father dies and needs the very
Mm.
exact nuggets that I
Yeah.
wrote in that book
Yeah.
to help her navigate grief. I'm thinking, Jesus, you're not being fair. I'm
Mhm.
grieving, and you're instructing me to write a book. But he saw what was ahead,
Yeah.
and he knew
Yeah.
that there was going to be someone on the journey
It's so
that was
good.
going to need my wisdom.
Absolutely. I love that. I always say that I just do not believe everything I've been through is for naught. It didn't have, God wastes nothing. No tears,
Waste
no grief, no
nothing.
pain, no trauma. And so, like you said, someone needs to know that they're not alone in it. They need to know that someone gets it. Because oftentimes we do feel like nobody understands or nobody gets it. They haven't been through what I've been through. But when you share, it gives them the opportunity to have some relatability there. And so I love that you share that. That's extremely powerful. What continues to drive Leah today? How do you maintain the inspiration and purpose that God's placed on your life?
It's so funny. I think every day I'm learning to embrace it.
Mm.
It's funny because as I've done this work and been in my field for 12 years and have an incredible network and people know me, I'm still learning to embrace the call and embrace where I
Hmm.
am. It's always interesting how people meet me and they're like, so like, oh my God, it's you. And for me, I'm like, who we got talking about? Because I'm
Yeah.
still Leah. So
Yeah.
I think every day that goes by, I'm learning to embrace that I am unique, that I am not regular, that I'm not common. I'm learning to embrace being uncommon. It's very interesting,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but I'm learning to embrace it. And I think that's what
Mhm.
drives me is that I stopped looking at life as, a destination and start looking at it as a journey. And so every
Mhm.
day I'm on this journey and me and God are holding hands and I'm just kind of like, all right, where you lead, I follow.
Yeah.
So it's a everyday embracing that I'm called and I'm anointed for the call. And as much as I want to just be Leah, to the world,
Listen.
I'm not just Leah, I'm the culture doctor to the world, I'm this inspiration. And so every day I just, I thank God that he uses me as a vessel. And I also just ask him, like, give me what I need today to continue
Yeah.
to embrace where I am on the journey and to continue to walk with you on this journey. So that's what's fueling me right now is every day I'm just like, all right, Lord, what we doing?
Mhm.
And
I
walking
love
with him daily.
Yeah, I love that. And I identify with that as well because I'm like you. I just rather be Angela and go somewhere and sit down and live, like the Bible says, a quiet life. And
Yup.
it's like every time I try, God's like, nope, I got something else for you to do. I've been talking about how we were focused so much on events and networking and social connection events. And God is shifting me to activate women in leadership and
I
in
love
ministry in the
it.
marketplace. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And so it's been a tug of war. Like you said, every day I have to decide, am I going to say yes to God or yes to my comfort and in my disobedience? That's what you, and ultimately you're saying, no. When you say no, it's disobedience. So every day I got to say, okay, Lord, like you said, am I going to say yes to you or yes to comfort and disobedience?
Because
So
I
I
mean,
told
either way, it's gonna cost you, right? And I
either
think that's the
way.
piece that people forget is that your calling will cost you,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
disobedience will cost you,
It's going to
right?
cost
It's going to cost you either way. So
you.
yeah, I just have to like every day be like, okay. I tell them all the time. I tell you yes, even with the fear and trembling. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
like
Not my will. Nevertheless, not my will. So,
not mine.
what key message do you hope our audience takes away from this conversation today?
Oh, that's so good. I think for me, it's like know that your story matters. Know that someone needs to hear what you've been through and where you've been. We do people disservices by not being open and honest about the messages and about the things that we've experienced. I always challenge people, especially to my parents out there, let your children learn the woman you are, the man you are, not daddy, not mommy, right? Who are you
Yeah.
as a woman? Who are you as a man? What have you experienced? I know for me, as a young kid, I saw my parents as like superheroes. They couldn't do no wrong in my eyes. And it wasn't until going through healing and unpacking my trauma and unpacking that abandonment that I got to see them as human beings. Two imperfectly perfect individuals just really trying to figure out life with the lack of tools and support that they had. And because I got to see the human side and to embrace the human side, it helped me in my healing journey. And I think for the children out there who might feel like me, who are like, I've been through some stuff, ask your mom or dad who they were as a man, as a woman. Ask them what's their story. Because I guarantee you, if you have that conversation and you hear their story, it will keep you from having the animosity and the unforgiveness and all the things that you have for them right now. And I can say that as a woman who asked her parents, "Where have you been in life? How did you get here?" Because in that conversation is where I learned my mother was molested. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
got her to the drugs. It was in that conversation that I learned that my father's father was killed. And so he
Mm-hmm.
didn't have no dad. You see what I'm saying? But if you don't
Mm-hmm.
know those things because we don't want to tell the story,
Yeah.
about where we've been, right?
Yeah.
Then this is how we have a generation that's now going no contact, don't want to deal with nobody. Everybody, I'm cutting everybody off. When we can solve all of those things with two things, love and
Mm-hmm.
telling our story. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I hope people get away with from this episode is tell your story and don't be ashamed of it.
I love it. I love it. Listen, culture doctor, you done took us to church. You done gave us some golden nuggets, some things to chew on, think about, all the things. And so I so appreciate you for joining and sharing your story, your
Yes.
voice, and your wisdom. Your journey is both inspiring and transformative. And we're so grateful here at That Girl Global for the impact that you are making. To everyone watching, thank you for tuning in to Inspiring Voices. Stay connected for more stories that uplift, empower, and transform. Until next time, continue to walk in purpose, share your voice, and inspire the world around you. Bye.